Level 1, the applicant. You don't find this job. This job finds you. There is no website. There is no form. There is no HR department with a friendly recruiter who asks where you see yourself in 5 years. There is no LinkedIn post, no job description, no benefits package, no office address. The door to this profession does not exist until someone decides you're ready to walk through it, and by the time they decide that, you've already been watched for longer than you know. It starts with a test you don't know you're taking. Maybe you're military, Special Forces. Rangers. Someone who has done tours in places that don't appear in news cycles, where the rules of engagement were more suggestion than law, where the mission briefing lasted for minutes and the debrief was 2 words, good work. You're not just good at pulling a trigger. Anyone can pull a trigger. You're good at the architecture of violence, the planning, the patience, the ability to sit in a hide for 72 hours without moving, watching a door, waiting for a man to walk through it, the ability to feel nothing when he does. Or maybe you spent 15 years inside the legal system and learned, slowly and then all at once, exactly how broken it is. You watched guilty men walk free on technicalities. You watched evidence disappear. You watched judges rule in ways that could only be explained by envelopes passed in parking garages. You stopped believing in the machine, and someone noticed that you stopped. The first contact is oblique, a mutual acquaintance. A referral so indirect it barely registers. A man at a bar who asks you a question that sounds like small talk but isn't. You answer honestly. He nods slowly, the way someone does when an answer confirms a hypothesis they already had. He leaves before you finish your drink. 3 weeks later, a number appears in your phone with no name attached. You don't know how it got there. You call it anyway. A voice answers on the second ring. It says, "We've been watching you for 8 months. We think you're ready for a conversation." You have the conversation. You don't say yes immediately, because people who say yes immediately are dangerous in the wrong way. You think about it for 3 days. Then you call back. Welcome to the profession. There is no ceremony. There is no going back. Level 2, the apprentice. They pair you with a man whose name you will never learn. He is somewhere between 50 and 60, though it's difficult to say precisely. His face has weathered many seasons without being destroyed by any of them. He speaks 4 languages fluently. He has worked in 11 countries. He has never been arrested. He has never appeared in any database connected to any government. He is, by every official measure, no one. He will be your instructor for the next 18 months. The education begins not with weapons, but with invisibility. You spend the first month learning to exist without leaving traces. Not the Hollywood version, not disguises and fake beards, but the granular, exhausting reality of it. Pay for everything in cash, always, even things that feel too small to matter, a coffee, a newspaper. Vary your routes obsessively, never the same way twice. Not from your apartment to the grocery store, not from the train station to the hotel. Predictability is a death sentence, sometimes literally. You learn to rent cars under names that don't exist. Check into hotels without creating digital records. Carry a phone in a way that it cannot track you. Communicate in ways that leave no forensic residue. Exist in a city of 8 million people and register in 0 of their memories. Month 2. Surveillance and counter-surveillance. You spend 3 weeks doing nothing but walking through cities, while being followed by your instructor's associates, trying to identify them. You fail repeatedly, then less repeatedly, then rarely. When you can walk into a train station, identify all 6 members of a surveillance team within 4 minutes, and exit through a route they haven't covered. Your instructor says nothing. He just nods. Month 4 through 7, the study of targets. You learn to build a profile of a human being from fragments. Public records, social media, court documents, property filings. You learn pattern of life analysis. Where someone goes, when, who they see, what they eat, which route they drive, and whether they vary it. You spend 40 days following a civilian your instructor selected, a test subject with no knowledge he's being watched. You document everything. His morning run, always the same route. His struggling marriage, visible in the parking lot of a grocery store. His secret, visible on Wednesday afternoons at an apartment 12 blocks from his office. You hand in a 40-page document. Your instructor reads it in 20 minutes. Then he says, now forget everything in this document. This exercise was to teach you how to see people, not objects, people. If you ever forget that the person you're studying is a person, you will make mistakes. And in this profession, mistakes have a specific and irreversible consequence. Month 8 through 12, the technical education. Ballistics not just as marksmanship, but as forensic narrative. How to select caliber and platform to control the investigative story that follows a shot. How suppressor technology actually functions versus how it functions in cinema. How to construct, transport, and dispose of a platform that can never be forensically connected to you. You never fire the same weapon twice. Poisons in clinical detail. Substances that appear as natural causes. Substances that mimic cardiac events. Dosing administration, metabolization timelines, detection windows in standard toxicology screens, and the specific panels that would need to be ordered to find what you've used. Panels almost never ordered in the absence of specific suspicion. Staging a robbery gone wrong, a suicide, a car accident. You study hundreds of actual case files, real investigations, real autopsies, real forensic reports. You learn what investigators look for and therefore learn exactly what to give them. The last 6 months, live work, supporting role only, logistics, surveillance, counter-surveillance. You watch your instructor work twice. Then he watches you work once, from a distance, while you think you're alone. On the day you finish, he meets you at a cafe. He orders coffee. He says, clean work means no one knows work was done. Everything else is execution. He leaves without finishing his coffee. You never see him again. Level 3, the contractor. Your first contract arrives inside a hollowed book on the third shelf of a second-hand bookstore. A single index card, a name, a city, a profession, a date, an 8-digit number. The number is the fee, transferred through a mechanism that would require 3 international law enforcement agencies cooperating in real time to trace. No agency has ever traced it. You study the name for 72 hours before accepting. The target is a pharmaceutical executive who signed off on falsified clinical trial data. 300 people died in markets the company classified as acceptable losses. No regulator opened a file. No prosecutor convened a grand jury. No journalist published a word because the legal team was faster and more expensive than the truth. You spend 3 weeks in his city before you do anything. The contract is completed on a Wednesday. It looks like a heart attack because the substance metabolizes in 11 hours and is invisible to any screen ordered. Without specific suspicion. There is no specific suspicion. The man had high blood pressure and a history of stress. The paramedics don't look twice. The medical examiner signs the certificate the same afternoon. You are in a different country before the obituary is written. You feel something that isn't quite guilt and isn't quite satisfaction. Closer to completion. The sense that a calculation has been resolved. You eat dinner in your hotel room. You sleep well. In the morning you chat for the second half of the fee. It's there. The second contract. The third. The fourth. You develop a personal methodology. A signature so subtle that no investigator has ever identified it as a signature. You take only contracts that survive a specific ethical test you designed yourself. No civilians, no family members, no children ever under any circumstances. No political work for governments because governments are the clients you trust least. This principle has cost you contracts. You have never reconsidered it. Level 4, the specialist. 5 years in, the contracts become more complex. Targets with security details. Targets inside protected environments, former intelligence officers, cartel leadership with armed protection running 3 shifts. These contracts require something beyond the standard methodology. You develop a specialization you call access engineering, the art of getting close to someone who has made closeness impossible. You study protective security until you understand exactly where the protocols have gaps, where human nature creates vulnerabilities in even the best designed system, a protectee who insists on deviating from protocol, a security team that trusts a specific vendor, a rotation gap that exists for mundane scheduling reasons and has never been flagged because no one has identified it as a gap yet. You begin constructing identities at a depth that makes your early work look primitive. Not just documents, but professional histories that survive investigation. LinkedIn profiles connected to real networks. Academic credentials connected to real institutions. Work histories verified by phone numbers routing to real people. You spend for months building a single identity. By the time you deploy it, it has existed for 2 years. The other specialization is patience that most contractors don't possess and most clients don't want to pay for. 12 and 18-month timelines. You embed in a target's world so gradually that by the time the moment arrives, you are a familiar face. Not a friend, never a friend, but a recognizable presence that no longer triggers wariness. A man who eats at the same restaurant twice a week eventually stops noticing the regular. At the corner table, you complete 3 contracts at this complexity level over 4 years. All of them closed. All of them archived in various jurisdictions as natural events or accidents or unsolved cases, with no viable investigative thread. Level 5, the ghost. In your 12th year, something changes. Not externally. The work is clean. The fees exceed anything you need. The operational security is impeccable. Nothing has gone wrong in 12 years. What changes is internal, and it changes slowly, the way erosion happens. Not a single event, but a gradual wearing away of something you cannot name. It is not remorse exactly. You made choices about what you would and wouldn't do, and you have honored them without exception. And yet, you begin keeping a record. Not names. Names are dangerous, but a count. A small notebook locked in a safe in a city where you've never taken a contract. Just a number. You open it sometimes and look at it. You don't know exactly what you're looking for. Some acknowledgement, perhaps, that the ledger exists even if no one will ever audit it. You take fewer contracts. The ethical test becomes more rigorous. Some you decline because the target doesn't satisfy the test and the fee is no longer a sufficient argument. You build longer gaps between work. 6 months, then 9. In your 15th year, you disappear. Not dramatically. You stop accepting contact from the channels you've operated through. You let the identities go dormant. You move to a small town in a country with no particular strategic importance, clean air, slow pace, neighbors who are mercifully incurious. You buy a house with cash. You plant a garden. You get a dog. The operational habits take years to fade. You still check the logs twice. Still sit with your back to the wall. Still vary your route to the market even though the only person who might be following you is a retired school teacher who nods when your paths cross. You still wake at 3 in the morning with the alertness of a person whose nervous system was trained to treat stillness as a threat. You walk the perimeter. You check the windows. Nothing is there. Nothing has ever been there. You go back to bed. Level 6, the final calculation. You are 53 years old. Your house smells like wood smoke and coffee. Your dog is getting old. Your garden produces more tomatoes than you can eat. Your neighbors know you as a quiet man who traveled for work and retired early. There are 2 people on earth who know your real name. Both have reasons to keep it. You trust both of them with the trust built over years and tested repeatedly. 2 people out of 8 billion. The entire weight of your actual identity resting on 2 people's loyalty and your own discipline. And that foundation has held. So far. In this profession, so far is everything. You think about the notebook sometimes. The number in it. You haven't opened it in 2 years, but you know the number. You carry it the way you carry everything else you don't speak aloud. A specific weight, familiar enough that you stop noticing it most of the time. The way you stop noticing the weight of your own body. The job hollows certain things out. The ability to fully trust, because you spent 15 years studying how trust is manufactured and exploited, and you cannot unknow that. The ability to be fully present, because some part of your cognitive architecture still runs the background process, scanning exits, noting the face that has appeared more than once. The ability to believe entirely in systems of justice, because you became a parallel system of justice and you know how arbitrary the mandate was. How much of the ethical framework was constructed by one person, you, with no oversight and no appeal. But not everything was hollowed. The garden is real. The dog is real. The slow evenings are real. The coffee on the porch before anyone else in the town is awake. Small things, quiet things, The ordinary furniture of a life without spectacle. You didn't know at 30, sitting across from a man watching him leave his coffee unfinished. That ordinary was what you'd eventually be most grateful for. Somewhere right now, a young person is imagining what this life looks like. They're imagining the precision, the invisibility, the clean satisfaction of a problem solved without trace, a wrong corrected without court. They're feeling the pull of it, the sense that they were built for something specific and rare that most people lack the capacity to do. They are not imagining the notebook. They are not imagining to people holding the weight of a real name. They are not imagining 3 in the morning and the perimeter walk, and the specific loneliness of being truly known by almost no one for the better part of 2 decades. They'll learn. They always do. But by the time they learn, the door is already behind them, and there's no mechanism for going back through it, and the only direction available is forward, carrying whatever they are capable of carrying, until the day they find themselves on a porch with coffee and a garden and an old dog, doing the arithmetic of what it all cost. Most days, you think it was worth it. Some days, you're not sure. You drink your coffee. The dog comes to the door. You let him in. That's enough. Level 7, the echo. You tell yourself the past is finished, but the past is not a door that closes. It is a sound that lingers, a vibration that continues long after the initial impact has ended. And sometimes, in the quietest hours of the afternoon, when the sun sits lazily over your garden and the world feels disarmed of urgency, you catch fragments of it, not as memories exactly, but as impressions, as instincts that rise uninvited, as a shift in your posture when a car drives to slowly past your house for the second time in 1 hour, as the way your eyes move before your thoughts do, cataloging, measuring, dismissing or not dismissing, never fully at rest, never entirely off duty even in a life you have deliberately stripped of all missions. You begin to notice patterns again, and at first you dismiss them because pattern recognition is the residue of your former life, a reflex that once kept you alive but now has no obvious function. Yet the human mind, once trained to see the world as a series of interconnected variables, does not simply revert to ignorance. It continues to compute even when there is nothing left to solve. And so when the same unfamiliar vehicle appears on different days at different hours, never stopping, never interacting, only passing, you log it mentally without intention. The way one logs the weather or the time of sunset, unconsciously, automatically, without attaching meaning until meaning insists on attaching itself. It would be easy to ignore, and for weeks you do, because retirement, if it is to be real, requires a deliberate refusal to engage with the instincts that defined you. It requires the discipline of inaction, which in many ways is harder than action ever was, because action has clarity and purpose and outcome, while inaction is a sustained act of faith in. The absence of threat and faith has never been your strongest faculty, but you practice it anyway, watering your plants, feeding your dog, speaking in short, polite sentences to neighbors who know nothing about the architecture of your former existence and never will. Then one morning, the pattern breaks, the car does not pass, it stops. Not in front of your house, not directly, but close enough that the deviation registers instantly. Close enough that your body reacts before your mind forms the question, and you feel it. That old alignment, that silent internal shift where every sense sharpens, every assumption falls away, and the world becomes once again what it used to be, a system of variables with potential consequences. You do not move immediately because movement is information, and information, once given, cannot be taken back. So you remain where you are, standing at the sink with a cup in your hand, watching through the reflection in the window rather than turning your head, because direct observation is obvious and obvious is dangerous. And you count the seconds without appearing to count them, measuring duration because duration is intent and intent is everything. 30 seconds, 1 minute. 2. No one exits the vehicle, no door opens, no signal is given. 3 minutes, then the car leaves. And just like that, the world returns to normal, except it does not. Because normal is no longer a stable condition once it has been interrupted. And you know this with a certainty. That does not require articulation, the same way you once knew when a target would deviate from routine even when all observable data suggested otherwise. Because beneath the visible patterns there are always invisible ones, and those are the ones that matter. You do not tell anyone because there is no one to tell, and even if there were, explanation would require disclosure, and disclosure is a currency you no longer possess in usable form. So instead you adjust, subtly, almost imperceptibly, reintroducing small elements of the life you left behind, not fully, not completely, but enough to create a margin of safety that exists only in your own awareness. You vary your routine again, not dramatically, not in a way that would attract attention, but enough that if someone were observing, their observations would begin to lose predictive value. Because predictability is leverage, and you have spent too many years understanding leverage to ever willingly provide it again. Days pass, then weeks, nothing happens. And this is the most dangerous phase. The phase where the absence of action begins to suggest the absence of threat, where the mind seeks equilibrium and the body follows, where vigilance softens not because it should, but because maintaining it indefinitely requires a cost, and cost, when unvalidated by outcome, begins to feel unnecessary. You almost believe it was nothing, almost, until the notebook returns to your thoughts, not because of the car, not directly, but because the car reminds you of something else, something more abstract and more permanent. The idea that actions do not disappear simply because time has passed, that consequences, like patterns, may take years to manifest, but are no less real for their delay. And so one evening, without fully deciding to, you unlock the safe and take the notebook out and place it on the table in front of you. And for a long time you do not open it, because opening it is an acknowledgement, not just of what you did, but of what it might still mean. When you finally do, the number is exactly where you left it, unchanged, unambiguous. A simple integer that represents a series of decisions made across 15 years. Each one justified in the moment, each one aligned with the framework you constructed, and yet, seen all at once, stripped of context and narrative, it becomes something else, something heavier, something less precise and more existential. A question without a clear answer. You close the notebook, you return it to the safe, and for the first time in a long time, you consider a possibility you have avoided since the day you walked away. That retirement is not an end state, but a temporary condition, that the life you built, quiet and contained and deliberately small, exists not outside your past, but adjacent to it, vulnerable to it, potentially defined by it in ways you cannot fully control. The next morning, you wake earlier than usual, not from anxiety, not exactly, but from a clarity that feels almost like purpose. And you step outside onto the porch and the air is cold and still and the town is asleep. And for a moment, everything is exactly as it has been for years, unchanged, undisturbed. And then you see it. Something so minor that anyone else would miss it. Something that exists just at the edge of perception. But for you it is enough. A footprint, not yours, not your neighbor's. Too close to the house, too recent, too deliberate in its placement. As if someone stood there not to pass by but to observe, to orient themselves, to confirm something. You do not panic. Panic is noise. You observe, you analyze. You begin without consciously deciding to begin. The process you know better than anything else in the world. The reconstruction of an unknown actor's intent from minimal data points. The slow and methodical expansion of a single anomaly into a working model of reality. A model that will either confirm itself or collapse under new information, but will, in either case, guide your next action. And as you stand there, looking at the imprint in the soil, feeling the quiet weight of your own history pressing subtly against the present, you understand something with absolute certainty. Something you have always known but have never needed to articulate until now. The door you walked through all those years ago does not close, it waits. And sometimes when the conditions are right, when the variables align, when the past and the present intersect in just the right way, it opens again. Not to invite you back, but to remind you that you never fully left, that the life you built on the other side was always contingent, always provisional, always subject to revision by forces you once understood intimately, and may now be forced to understand again. You look at the garden, you look at the house, you think about the dog still asleep inside, unaware of anything beyond the immediate comforts of warmth and routine. and the simple certainty that you will be there when he wakes. Then you step off the porch, not toward the house, not away from it, but into the space where decision becomes action, where the final calculation, the one you thought you had already completed, begins again. Not as a repetition of the past, but as its inevitable continuation, shaped by everything you have done and everything you have tried to leave behind. Converging now into a single question that no one else can answer for you and no one else will ever fully understand. What does a man do when the life he escaped begins, quietly and without permission, to find him again?